Thank you and welcome to today's webinar, Conquer Your Expanded Projects One Piece at a Time. We have our presenter, Matthew McCarris, standing by. We will be beginning our webinar in just a couple of minutes as we wait for a few more attendees to join us here on the site. Thank you for joining us and please stand by. Hello, I'm John Klobuchar with InEight, and I'd like to welcome you to our latest webinar in our collaborative document management series. Today's webinar is titled Conquer Your Expanded Projects One Piece at a Time. Our presenter today is Matthew McCarris, who is a solutions engineer at InEight. Matthew has worked for more than 11 years in industrial and civil construction, focusing mostly on power, mining, oil and gas, and transmission. He has served in a number of roles during his career, including estimator, field engineer, superintendent, project engineer, and project manager. Matthew has extensive experience in both the U.S. and Australia, where he is presenting from today. And by the way, we appreciate him staying up extra late for this. It's just past 2 o'clock in the morning there, so thank you, Matthew. If you have any questions as you watch today's webinar, please submit them in the box marked questions, or if you want to take it offline or ask a question later, you can also email webinars@inneight.com with your questions. Also, today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending you a link to the video within the next week. Once again, we're glad you've joined us, and now let me introduce Matthew McCarris, who will take it from here. Matthew?
Thanks, John, and thanks everyone for joining. So as John said, today we're going to talk about conquering your expanded projects one piece at a time. So what exactly does this mean? Well, our projects are becoming larger and more complicated than ever before. We've got more regulatory requirements. We're building modules offshore or building them in different parts of the country. And we're bringing all that information into one spot on our job site. And through this, we're generating more data and more information. And this data and information is becoming very difficult to manage in a, concise and easy to find manner. So these large projects can be complicated. They're going to have complicated sequencing, whether it's a vertical building or it's a bridge or a very detailed road interchange. Or they can have large areas, roads, railroads, infrastructure, pipelines, transmission lines, just cover a large, long area where we've got disconnected information from the beginning of the project to the end of the project. Or they can have complicated systems, whether it's an LNG project, other oil and gas projects, maybe it's a power plant or some type of mineral processing. They can have lots of these complicated systems that all interconnect with each other. So you may have seen or heard someone say a quote similar to this: "I completed the inspection and the paperwork, let me find it and send it to you." So finding and organizing our data is becoming extremely difficult, and it's just down to the sheer volume that we're generating based on the size of these projects, the disconnected locations, and the new requirements, both regulatory and owner requirements. So what's happening? We're losing information. Paperwork's being misplaced. The site office may have some paperwork that doesn't get scanned in, that that the main project office needs. The paperwork's incomplete, and because it's disconnected, we're not able to find it. And so we've now got to regenerate that information, and it's leading to duplication of efforts. And that's, duplicating inspections because we can't find paperwork. Now we need to go back out and re-perform quality inspections. And, our as-built drawings, we may lose an as-built drawing or a red line markup that we've done on work that's been completed. Now we need to go back out, remeasure, redo our drawing, and resubmit that for review. And all this additional work and loss of information is requiring additional resources, or alternatively, is requiring additional time to complete properly at the end of the job so that we can turn the project over to the client. So what's the answer? Lots. So what is a lot? A lot is taking our project and slicing and dicing it down into manageable portions. So we can take a high-rise building. It could be floors of the building. It could be changes on infrastructure projects. So if you've got a 10-mile long road project, your lots could be miles 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, etc. If you've got a project with a very large footprint, it can be broken down into defined areas or a defined grid, and each one of those grids is a lot item. Or if you've got a large project, say a power project, it could be broken down into smaller support facilities like a water treatment plant or a cooling water tower. Those would act as lots as well. Or if in an industrial environment, they could be individual systems, whether it's an electrical system or a piping system. So I've been on projects I've been on a water catchment facility where we had 15 to 20 hectares of bulk earthworks that we had to do. And that's exactly how we broke it down, is in a grid fashion, and each one of those grid items was a lot. I've also been on a very large oil and gas project where we had literally containers, 40-foot containers full of documentation that we had broken down into different systems, and those different systems were our lots. And it was 40-foot containers, 3 40-foot containers full of documentation. So let's now take a look at our manageable portions that we've been talking about. Let's say we've got a road and bridge job. Here we're looking at a section of that job, and we'll say that this project maybe is 4 miles long, and it's got a couple of bridges to it. So how do we actually slice and dice it? We set our lots in place for our roads. We can say, okay, we've got 4 miles of road. Let's break that into 4 separate lots. You could break them into smaller lots if you wanted. And this is how we're going to collect and collate all of our information. And then we'll have a lot for our bridges. Here we'll look at bridge number 1 as our lot. So what are our key elements of our lots? So we'll start with our lot, and we'll get into sublots, but each lot can have subs and smaller sections within it. And lots are defined by their facilities. So in our road and bridge example on the previous slide, we'll start looking at our bridges. So our facility may be bridges, and then we can have a sub facility that is the specific bridge that we're working on. And what this information allows us to do is it describes the area and describes the section of work that we're working on, so that when documents are uploaded, input into the system, they're automatically associated into the correct lot with the correct forms and the correct paperwork. And then from our lot, we can have sublots, and then we can have processes within the lot and those sublots. Here we've got a preliminary process as well as earthworks, which can then be defined further into sub-processes such as demolition or clearing and grubbing or bulk excavation, paving maybe, or structural steel for a bridge. So again, all this information allows us to more clearly define and break out all the paperwork and information that's being generated, and allows us to filter automatically and sort that into our correct lots for consumption, use, and turnover at a later date. And we call all this our lot info management. So what actually goes into a lot? We've now defined a lot as a scope of work, but what information do we actually put in a lot? And really, it's anything and everything associated with it. It can be correspondence, correspondence to the client, correspondence to subcontractors, material suppliers, documents, your design drawings, as-built drawings, plans, procedures, transmittals of information to your suppliers, your subcontractors, to the head client, to the client, or even if you're a subcontractor to your head contractor. Defects, whether we can manage our punch list and control all of that information within our lot. Any issues that we've had during construction that need to be rectified and the rectification all live within our lot. And forms for RFIs, NCRs, our quality information, ITPs, ITRs, all of that information lives within the lot. And what it's telling us is the complete story of that lot. So all of this is defined, all this information is placed within our lot using our lot info management that we talked about on the previous slide. And as this information is populated, we're now able to report on it. We're able to report on progress of the project as a whole, the completion progress of the individual lots at a very granular level, all the way down to individual documents or individual RFIs and NCRs, even down to the schedule of the lot. When did the work commence? When is it scheduled to finish? Are we tracking with our paperwork and our documentation to actually be able to close out that lot when we close out our physical work? And then also who is responsible for it. So here we're looking at the story of the project. We can see on the left-hand side, as well as in the center of the page, of our different lots for this project, and the different pieces of information within those lots. So we can see our sublot has mailed documents, transmittals, engineering packages. There's been some defects, some forms, some checklists for QA, QC documentation. And then we can also see when the lots were opened, when they were closed or projected to be closed, when work has been completed, as well as some other information. And this is really all building up to tell us the story of this lot. And this is the defining information of our lot. If we drill down into our lot 1-01, we can see that we've got some required metadata field and required management info, which is our facility, our sub-facility that we've talked about, our process and sub-process, some additional fields of area. And this is, again, allowing us to pull and automatically collect the information that's been input into the system. We can tie this to the different handover stages or different construction phases of the project so that you can actually turn over documentation as those phases are complete, instead of having to wait till the end, or instead of waiting till the end of the project. And we can see who's responsible, not only from a construction side, but from an engineering side, and then all the way down to the foreman level if required. And then we've got some other additional defining information just for information about if it's linear, what chainages are we from. So from here, we're looking at, 100 yards to 2,000 yards, square meters if applicable, and even tying it back to our work breakdown structure, either in our schedule or in our cost management solution. And then we've got information based on when work's commenced, when it's been completed, and closing out our lot. If we further drill down into it, we can go in and look at the individual documents or individual pieces of information within each lot. Here we're looking on our mail tab, and we can see we've got several letters, several memos, a couple of RFIs, all relating to this one lot. And we can see that we can associate statuses to them, outstanding or closed or other statuses, so that we can report on those. And this allows us to report on our overall completion status, assign due dates and actual completed dates. And we're not actually able to close the lot out and turn that over until all items within our lot are closed. So here we're looking at mail, but it's the same for documents, packages, checklists, and forms. Everything has that outstanding or closed status. So we can check at a very granular level what is still outstanding for us to complete this work and turn the package over to the client. And because we have that at a very granular level, we're able to report on what's outstanding for each lot. So we can run summary reports, lots that are closed, lots that are still in progress, and where are they at? How many items are still outstanding? Lots that have yet not opened. You know, maybe we have started work, but we haven't started collecting data. What's going on? Where's the disconnect there? How come we're not collecting it? And then some additional details on individual lots as well. So what are the outcomes of all this? Our documentation is centralized, it's tracked. We're eliminating loss of information, or we're greatly reducing that loss of information. So we're no longer duplicating efforts. Our information is collected and viewed in a way that fits the project. It's logical, it's based on how you built the project or how you're building the project. And it's all connected info, so we're connecting it to individual pieces of information. We're reducing the time for finding and redoing the documentation because we know where everything's at. We're not redoing something because we can't find it, because we know exactly where it's at. And we're providing a complete view of the project and the completion status. So it's that whole story of the project, all the information that we've input, all the communications about that section of the project. So we've got that full view with correspondence, all our QA documentation, red lines, as-built, punch list items, all of it's right there at your fingertips. And because it's all right there at your fingertips, the closeout process is a breeze. There's no more compiling at the end of a project. That project I was on, where we had 3 40-foot containers of documentation, we had 3 people going through, compiling that documentation and transmitting it to the client. 3 full-time resources doing nothing but that at the end of the project to turn it over. If we follow the lots, we don't need that. At the end of our project, it's literally a click of a button for review, approval, and submittal to the client. And you're doing it as you go. So you don't need those additional resources. It just becomes a habit and a daily task to get your information in. It's all stored in that one spot. And that's what I've got. Thanks, everyone.
A very informative presentation on lots and the lots module of InEight document. That brings us to the Q&A section of the webinar. And again, if you'd like to ask a question for Matthew, please do so in the box marked questions there on your screen. Now, we do have some questions that have come in during the webinar. And Matthew, our first one, our organization builds 2 to 4-story buildings. Would you suggest we use this lot functionality for these types of projects?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely, because you can define your lots, depending on how large those stories are, you can define your lots by those individual stories. So you've got essentially 4 turnover packages or 4 buckets where you're storing information. Or if it's a big sprawling building with 4 stories, you can further break down those individual floors into sublots or even lots of their own, depending on what best fits the size of your project.
Okay, and here's one. Can you go into a little more detail on when we would use lots versus sublots?
Sublots are, so lots is your defined scope of work, and sublots just lets you break it down into that little bit more detail. So if we go back to our road example, our lot may be our 0.0 or chainage 0 to 1 mile, but for that road example, we may have bulk excavation that needs to happen, or clearing and grubbing, or paving, and those individual activities or larger activities within that lot then become your sublots. On a structural mechanical piping example, your system may be your lot, but you may have a sublot of all your pipe supports and a sublot of all of your specialized testing that you need for that system and a sublot for the actual piping installation. It's just a further way to break down that work so that it's a little bit more logical and a little bit more logical for the way that you store the documentation.
Okay, here's one for you, Matthew. Can I create separate closeout packages for each lot?
We can. Yes, we can, and that's kind of the point of the lots, is that it becomes its own little closeout package, and all that information, and you're building your closeout package as you are constructing the work. And then once that work's done, you've got all the information, and that now becomes your closeout package for that scope of work. So it allows you to progressively turn over your project as work's completed instead of trying to do all at once at the end of a project.
Okay, Matthew, thank you. To learn more about InEight as well as our collaborative, before I go into the close, late questions come in. We're always glad to see these questions. And this one for you, Matthew, is, are lots tied into the schedule?
They can be, yes. It depends on how you set up your project, but yes, they definitely can be. And normally what we see is that the way you have your project broken out in your schedule is you've got your schedule broken out by specific areas or specific tasks. And these lots naturally align with those tasks because your schedule is breaking your overall, we need to construct a road, down into smaller scopes of work, and that's exactly what we do for lots. So you can line those up as a one-to-one relationship or as a one-to-many relationship.
Okay, I'm going to wait a couple of seconds here until we have any. Oh, we have another one that's come in. Hopefully you've had some more Mountain Dew, Matthew, because we have more questions. How does a lot align with the WBS, the work breakdown structure?
In a very similar way to how it breaks down, how it aligns to the schedule. We can have, depending on the detail of your work breakdown structure, it can again be that one-to-one relationship where if you've got a specific system or a specific piping type or a specific building that's part of your work breakdown structure, we can align that one-to-one with a lot. So it works very, very similar to that of the schedule. And if you have that, especially if it's that one-to-one relationship, you're able to get a correlation between your schedule, your work breakdown structure, and your lot, and you can tie that across both time, which is your schedule, finance, which is your work breakdown structure, and your quality and turnover documentation.
All right, thank you for that, Matthew. And I'm keeping an eye here. Looks like that will be it for today. We thank you for the questions. Very, very nice. Nicely done. So you've heard Matthew's presentation. To learn more about InEight as well as our collaborative document management solutions, visit InEight.com and click on the Request a Demo button. And make sure to mark your calendars for our next webinar on September 25th. It's from our Planning, Scheduling, and Risk series. It's titled Protect Profit Margin, Reduce Risk Before You Bid. Thank you for watching. This concludes our webinar.